This is a Minecraft-based fanfiction adapted to the story of The League of Mental Gen. Working title, All Hail Autocorrect. Retro Guy woke up once in the half-dark of early morning. She was still tired, so she resolved to do something about Red Flag after another period of sleep. When her eyes opened again, she tried to lift herself up, but Red Flag's entire body was pressed up against her, and his arms were lightly holding her, but his thing was pressed up against her rear from below, and she could feel its hardness against her, which was definitely doing something to her. Her temperature raised, a certain something in her pulled up, a tightening. She got up right away, shaking off Red Flag's feeble sleeping attempts to hold her in place. She looked back at him and realised that her pants situation was not fixed. She'd slept naked in bed with a man. Shaking this off, she opened her chest and pulled a few bundles of cloth and some lapis lazuli. Pulling the whole mess onto her workbench, she dyed the cloth and arranged it like a pair of jeans and sewed it all back together, giving her a new pair of pants. She put them on and turned around to see Red Flag lying back on his elbows, smiling. "That was quick," he said, eyes twinkling. "I was kind of enjoying the new look, though." She walked over to him and leaned against the wall facing towards him. "I noticed you chose my bed instead of yours," she stated. He gave a little non-committal shrug as if to say, "Yeah, so do you like me?" she asked. Red Flag said nothing, but gave another kind of shrug. "Yeah, whatever." Retro Guy stepped closer onto the bed. "Do you like me as in like?" she asked, face close to his. Red Flag returned the kiss and Retro Guy held his head closer. Red Flag put his fingers in her softer hair, stroking it as she pushed her tongue out into his mouth. He went along with it, fingers still entangled in her hair, feeling the silkiness of her strands. Red Flag grunted and Retro Guy pushed him to the bed. He landed with a thump, with Retro Guy on top of him. She kissed him one last time and sat up on top of him, pulling her shirt off. She put her hands at the hem of Red Flag's shirt, and he put his arms facing out, letting Retro Guy pull his shirt off and throw it where hers had gone. Then she leant back in and kissed him. His skin was warm against hers and his hands were on her toned back, moving in a gentle caress, nimbly moving from the knot of her breast bindings to the waistband of her jeans. Retro Guy stopped pushing with her tongue and let Red Flag take over, his tongue now in her mouth. He shifted his hands to the knot where the strip of cloth that bound her breasts was tied and undid it in a little movement. She sat up again, hot weight of her body pressing upon Red Flag's very apparent need. This isn't very erotic, is it? Red Flag looked up at her there on top of him, her breasts hanging free. They were larger than he'd expected, but not gigantic. More than he could fit in one hand, though, as he found out when he placed his hands upon her soft assets, squeezing and moving them. Retro Guy gasped as he let his thumbs brush her nipples, already erect and straining against his hands. He took one in between his index and thumb and rolled it gently back and forth. She let herself go limp, and all of a sudden her chest was in contact with Red Flag's face. Red Flag enjoyed her fragrance for a second before dragging his tongue in between her breasts, playing around and then flipping himself on top of her and unbuttoning his pants, pulling them off awkwardly. Retro Guy did the same, balling her pants up and throwing them where their shirts lay. She forced Red Flag back into his original position below her and took his undergarments off, sending them flying like all the other pieces of clothes. She shed her panties and looked down at Red Flag's members. It was hardened already and reminded her of Red Flag himself. If you were to pick a defining characteristic, it was long and thin, but not unnaturally so. She looked at Red Flag, he looked back at her. Her decision was apparent on her face. She let out a big breath, breathed in, and descended on it. Oh! It went past every barrier with her, filling her from below, throbbing inside her. It was an easy pass, and she barely felt the tear of her vaginal barrier. She raised up again, knees bending, then dropped. This time she felt a jolt of pleasure go up her spine. I don't think it's meant to be there. It was amazing. She did it again and again with a wild ferocity, mashing herself deeper and deeper on him every time, making him gasp or groan every time she came down like a Valkyrie upon his member. She sped up faster and faster, sliding up and down on him, bouncing like a slime up and down, until finally Red Flag couldn't hold himself anymore and let go, just as Retro Guy felt herself contract upon him, orgasming hard on his member, which started to shoot his seed out into her womb. She could feel its warmth inside her, and she savoured the last few seconds of pleasure before feeling her limbs lose their strength as she collapsed upon him. She rolled over a bit, letting his softening member drop out, still leaking his semen. "Oh my," Retro Guy gasped. "What have I done?"